Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. This is an unusual event for the Hay Festival. It's a discussion devoted to a forthcoming theatre piece, but it's not just any theatre piece, and it's certainly not just theatre, in fact. Nawr, Arwr, is that correct pronunciation?
Yep.
Now the Hero is part of the Great War commemoration 1418 now. It involves theatre, it involves choral music, visual art, performance art, and poetry and horticulture. Just so you know who's who, from the left is Owen Roberts, Owen Griffiths, Marc Rees, Owen Shears, and my name is Jasper Rees.
We also had a launch because the theatre event is an immersive experience, and we interweave three narratives of war. We have the Celtic period, the Great War, and contemporary conflict. So you have three soldiers representing each period. You also have the counterpoint, which is played by the wonderful Eddie Ladd. She's the peace protester. You see her. And also you have then shots of graft, which is a garden, which is led by Owen Griffiths. He'll speak more about that, and that's the construction work that you see going on, and some planting. And also then you see images of us doing a recce, some with Owen and Owen Roberts, and with also the late Johan Johansson, which of course we're going to touch upon today. So that just is kind of like showing the kind of mainly our kind of fields and what we're going to discuss today. Going to the panels, visiting the Brangwyn to watch concerts, and being absolutely fascinated and drawn to this amazing kind of colourful world, this kind of perfect paradise that he portrays. There's lots of fruit and flesh on display, and they are extraordinary. There's 16 of them, and I kind of recall that it was something to do with World War I. That, you know, behind this kind of fecundity is a kind of World War I memorial of great significance. So I thought that was a good way in, and also to do it and to celebrate these rather neglected panels. They have a fascinating history. They were commissioned by the House of Lords in 1928 as a commemoration of World War I. Brangwyn drew these kind of very kind of graphic, kind of very representational kind of scenes of the World War. One, too brutal apparently, and they were rejected. He then, almost kind of as a protest, kind of went absolutely the opposite and created this kind of paradise, perfect paradise, to represent the peoples and the produce of the empire that, of course, Britain called upon to kind of save Britain during World War I, and of course many of them died, so this is a commemoration to those people. Cities then bid for them. Swansea actually won this bid, ironically, so they won this bid to actually house the panels, and the Brangwyn Hall was being constructed, and they actually elevated the ceiling in order to accommodate the panels, and that was my way into World War I, because the panels represent regeneration, rejuvenation, and that's exactly what Owen's doing with his volunteers in Graft in the garden. So it's kind of a contemporary version of the panels.
It's beautiful, it's enigmatic, it's strange, but I knew that I wanted essentially to create a version. So I've called this a gleaning, as a way of referencing, I suppose, a gathering from a field that has already been harvested many times, but also obviously to reference the gleaning of the young men, and the fact that, again, the young men are harvested many times, again and again in conflict. It is a strange poem, isn't it? Because it's a lamentation and a celebration and a eulogy and an elegy all in one.
Just, could we begin, Owen, by talking about Johan Johansson?
Of course, yeah.
He is I've written down a phrase here which the American film director Aaron Moorhead said of one of his compositions, alas, prophetically, it's like he wrote his own requiem.
Well, I mean, his music, yeah, I mean, what can you say? It is, it's timeless, and I mean, a lot of his film scores, his orchestral pieces, everything to me already had, you know, death as a feature.
And unfortunately, you know, he and Owen came to Swansea to visit the Brangwyn, where I could take them on a kind of a tour of the whole experience, and he played the organ, so it's going to be for voice and organ, and that was a wonderful moment where he started to play kind of motifs which we recorded, so I think that would provide stimulus for the requiem itself. And you know, it will be sung by an extraordinary choir called Polyphony, led by the conductor Stephen Layton, who are the best choir in the world.
We spent years looking for singers who sing like this choir do. basically we found the perfect Johann choir, the ones we were looking for the whole time. So. And it goes on. He did the connection between beauty, order, and chaos really better than most, and that's crucial for the themes in this piece, absolutely, and the timelessness as well.
And what we're doing in this project is building a kind of green infrastructure and a socially engaged artwork, a project where people's expertise and knowledge and all the things that are dormant in crowds of people come out. So this what we're trying to do is create a kind of space where we can actually talk about, not through the growing of the vegetables and growing other things, how can we talk about where do we want to live, how do we want to live, and this idea of like how can we create a piece of useful art out of this. And sort of my interest is in edible landscapes and the idea of like how these edible landscapes in urban centres can be radical spaces or can be spaces for other types of conversations. So Swansea is a city which desperately needs as much help as it can get on the urban planning conversation. It's pretty disastrous. What we need is to talk about how green infrastructure could lead the way that the city develops, how we could talk about edible landscapes as civic landscapes and as political spaces. So how can we create more arenas for these kinds of conversations? So this is what's sort of underlying this work, is how we could create a new resource for the Waterfront Museum. And it's called Graft because it's a grafting of a garden onto a museum. And then we can also use the garden as a tool to talk about the collection. We can talk about our colonial history. We can talk about activating the collection in different ways. We can use it as an edible schoolyard. There's an amazing network of edible schoolyards across the States. We've probably heard of them, developed by Alice Waters.
I think 1489, I think it's got to be 3 years that you approached me, and I was like, and once I was, based, I kind of struck on the idea of the panels. I was like, oh, okay, of course we should do it in there, but of course we should use the beach. Of course the three narratives all will converge. Eddie will lead, she, as the peace protester, she will have a megaphone. She will declare the beginning, Gwira Aeth Gytrath, across the Swansea Bay to the people. She will guide the audience as though you're in a protest march, kind of embodying the Greenham Common movement, the suffragettes, and bringing those women together to recite together. There is a surprise, which I'm not going to tell you, but the contemporary soldier will emerge and his platoon, they will storm the Brangwyn. You will then enter the Brangwyn to an installation that will hopefully take you right back to the kind of visceral, kind of the root of World War I, where you will then hear the Requiem, which will be beautiful, I'm sure, and also, but there will be a performative element. There will be, we're working with kind of young boys from the Swansea Valley area. So for me, there is a very strong community element. And then after the Requiem, you have like 45, 50 minutes to look at different installations, scenes, reflections on war and peace, which will include 8 Tibetan monks creating a peace mandala, which is, perfect, because we begin on the beach. They are creating this amazing kind of healing, it's all about healing, kind of mandala, and on the last day, on the Sunday, the monks will scoop it up, take it back to the beach, and give it back to the sea. So that will be the final kind of healing kind of ritual.
The shortest answer is that the post-9/11 conflicts have run almost exactly parallel with my writing life. And so even when writing historically, for me it's nearly always a prism through which to look at this fact that, as I said before, we're still doing it. And at times of conflict, at times of war, public narratives tend to become very blunt. They tend to be painted with very broad brushstrokes. And I've always felt that part of the job of the writer is to drill back to the human and to the intimate, and to try to keep the human details of what conflict is in front of people's faces as much as possible. A pity it is, after toil, to see the suffering of our fresh men falling headlong in the field. A long sigh our lamentation, a long sigh for the broken men, the boys once golden, now crimson. Thank you.